Growing up in a family that treats your life's passion like an embarrassing phase is a quiet, exhausting kind of torture. 4 years, my mother introduced me as the daughter who was still finding herself, usually right before changing the subject to my sister's latest achievement. At 34, I had grown used to occupying the social equivalent of a ghost at our family dinner table. But everything shattered on the evening my sister brought her new boyfriend home, setting off a chain of events that culminated in a national television broadcast. My childhood home sat in a manicured neighborhood where appearances were the only currency that truly mattered. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these deep family stories. And tell me in the comments which country you are watching this video from today. That night, the good silver was polished to a mirror shine because my sister, Clara, was presenting Julian, a man from a prominent family of arts philanthropists. I arrived straight from my restoration studio, my skin carrying the faint scent of beeswax and ancient wood varnish. As the dinner progressed, Julian turned away from my father's repetitive stories about golf and addressed me with genuine interest. He asked what I did for a living, a completely normal question that instantly caused a freezing hush to fall over the dining room. Before I could even draw a breath, my mother let out a sharp, practiced laugh and told me not to embarrass the family. Clara leaned over, flashing her bright pageant smile, and whispered that I should probably just invent a corporate job this time. The table erupted into polite, rehearsed amusement, a collective sigh of relief that the family eccentric had been successfully put back in her place. Any other year, I would have swallowed the humiliation, passed the salad bowl, and retreated into silence. But that afternoon, I had been working on a centuries-old church altar, and my fingers still held the memory of craftsmanship that outlasted generations of critics. I looked directly at Julian and explained that I was a master art conservator, specializing in reviving historical structures. Julian did not laugh. Instead, a look of profound realization washed over his face as he pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a second before turning the screen to show an exquisite, flawlessly restored colonial cabinet. He explained that his family's preservation foundation had been searching for the artisan behind this exact masterpiece for over a year. My mother froze, her spoon suspended mid-air, as Julian revealed that my studio had been selected as the top choice to restore the massive historic ceiling at the local heritage manor. The silence that followed was so absolute you could hear the hum of the kitchen refrigerator 2 rooms away. Clara stared at me with a look of pure recalculation, realizing the sister she dismissed as a failure was the highly sought-after expert her boyfriend's family desperately wanted to hire. My mother desperately tried to minimize the moment, calling my career a cute little hobby. Julian, completely unaware of our toxic family hierarchy, politely corrected her, stating that a National Preservation Board does not award major contracts to hobbyists. Later that evening, my mother cornered me in the quiet of the kitchen while the others drank coffee on the patio. Her voice dropped into the cold, administrative tone she used when managing a crisis. She demanded that I turn down the contract immediately because Clara had already booked that exact historic manor for her upcoming wedding. She explained that having me climbing ladders in stained coveralls while Julian's high society relatives toured the venue would completely ruin the flawless impression she was trying to project. For the first time, the entire operating system of my family was laid bare on the counter next to the dirty dessert plates. My mother didn't care if I was exceptionally talented. She cared that my hands-on labor was unexplainable to her country club friends. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel, gave her a polite, non-committal answer, and drove back to my studio under the starlight. That night, I opened the formal invitation from the Preservation Trust and formally accepted the most significant project of my professional life. The next morning, Clara called me, her tone a predictable mix of superficial apology and intense interrogation. She demanded to know why I had made things uncomfortable at dinner, revealing that our mother had explicitly warned Julian beforehand that I was emotionally fragile and currently unemployed. It became glaringly obvious that my family viewed me as a managed risk, a liability to be kept in the shadows. Clara bluntly admitted that I simply wasn't supposed to matter that night, a confession that perfectly summarized 34 years of emotional exile. My journey to that moment hadn't been an accident, despite my mother's claims that I had simply wandered off a sensible path. Years ago, I abandoned a soul-crushing accounting degree after watching an elderly craftsman named Arthur restore a damaged church rail. He taught me that nothing is truly hopeless if someone possesses the patience to understand how it was originally put together. I spent 12 years learning the delicate chemistry of old varnishes and the sacred rule of restoration. Never do something you cannot safely undo. When Arthur passed away, he left me his historic brick workshop, his traditional tools, and a legacy of quiet, uncredited excellence. I realized I had spent over a decade giving broken objects their dignity back while allowing my own family to strip away mine. I had treated my invisibility as a form of humility, hiding behind the anonymous studio name out of fear. But my mother's protective housekeeping was actually a systematic effort to keep the world from seeing who I truly was. BY November, massive steel scaffolding filled the great ballroom of the Heritage Manor, reaching up toward a magnificent but heavily damaged 1897 mural. For 9 months, my life was defined by long days on my back beneath that painted sky and exhausting night shifts at a furniture warehouse to fund a failing studio boiler. My mother had cut off my grandfather's inheritance money to penalize me, forcing me to choose between freezing in my shop or surrendering my career. Yet, inch by inch, the magnificent colors of the old mural began to emerge. During the final months of the project, a television crew from a major national documentary series arrived to film the restoration's conclusion. The producer explained that their cameras would be filming the ballroom during Clara's wedding reception, which was the first official event on the venue's schedule. He warned me that if I chose to hide from the cameras, my mother would simply narrate my story for me. I realized that remaining invisible wasn't a neutral choice anymore. It was an invitation for others to rewrite my existence. The week before the wedding, Clara visited my workshop for the very first time, overwhelmed by the high society expectations of her new in-laws. She looked around at the historic furniture and remarked that I was incredibly lucky because nobody ever expected anything of significance from me. I looked at my sister and gently explained that having zero expectations wasn't luck. It was an emotional prison sentence I was finally finished serving. She left in tears, admitting our mother had already structured the wedding timeline to ensure I remained hidden. When the scaffolding finally came down in August, the ballroom was absolutely breathtaking, a radiant masterpiece reflecting over a century of history. The Preservation Trust permanently mounted a small bronze plaque near the grand entrance, explicitly crediting my studio for the massive restoration. When my mother walked in for her rehearsal and saw my name cast in metal, her face hardened with intense disapproval. She immediately turned to the wedding coordinator and coldly suggested placing a massive potted fern in that exact corner to hide the plaque. On the night of the wedding, the ballroom was crowded with prominent guests, elegant white lilies, and expensive television cameras tracking the celebration. As the reception reached its peak, the television producer approached my table, asking me to step into the lights for a live interview beneath my masterpiece. Suddenly, my mother's hand gripped my arm with terrifying strength, forcing me into a secluded service hallway behind the kitchen. She gave me a brutal ultimatum. If I chose to step in front of those cameras, I would be permanently banned from the family. Standing beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the service corridor, I looked at my mother and realized I was no longer afraid of her disapproval. I told her that I was no longer willing to act as the hidden crack in her perfect family table. I wasn't an embarrassment to be managed. I was the creator of the magnificent space everyone was celebrating tonight. Her eyes filled with tears as she confessed that respectability was the only shield she had ever known. But I gently told her I was choosing my own name over her illusions. I walked through the double doors, stepping directly into the bright studio lights as the director illuminated the spectacular ceiling overhead. A hush fell over the entire crowd of 180 guests as they looked up at the stunning artwork I had spent 9 months resurrecting. When the interviewer asked who was responsible for this miracle, I proudly announced my name and shared Arthur's philosophy on resilience. I explained that we shouldn't hide the broken parts of our history. We should make them strong enough to carry us forward. The room erupted into a thunderous standing ovation, led by Julian's family and eventually joined by my father and sister. My mother had quietly slipped out of the ballroom before the lights came up, unable to witness a reality she couldn't control. In the months that followed, my studio's calendar filled with prestigious museum commissions, allowing me to finally replace the old boiler on my own terms. My mother never apologized, but our relationship found a strange, distant equilibrium built on a reality she could no longer deny. Recently, My father arrived at the workshop carrying a shattered family heirloom that had been hidden away in a dark drawer for decades. Tucked inside the packaging was a brief note from my mother, written in her distinctive, elegant handwriting, asking if I had time to fix it. She will never learn to speak my language of emotional honesty, but trusting me to heal a broken piece of our history was the most profound statement she had ever made. I restored the piece using gold lacquer, ensuring the fractures were transformed into its most beautiful feature.